So, our first session today is a very important topic. It's about patient involvement in research or patient involvement in cancer research, sarcoma research. The idea is to give you an overview what's going on in patient involvement in cancer research, but also see some spotlights, some examples from the different countries or some personal experience in this field. Patient involvement in research has a longer tradition. Is someone in the room who knows where patient involvement in research started historically? Any idea? Who was the main driver on patient involvement in research? The patients from which disease? Huh? No, that's a long time ago. The AIDS community, exactly 30 years ago, around the AIDS or HIV community, they had been extremely active in being involved in research, driving the agenda and being really at the table in driving research forward. And this changed also a few years now in Europe, around about 20 years ago, when the cancer community started in different countries, but also then on a European level to ask for patient involvement in cancer research. Okay, so I will start with a short setting the scene, and then we will have some examples, practical examples about patient involvement in clinical research. This is a chart from my colleague, Kathy Oliver. Kathy Oliver is a very active patient advocate in another type of rare cancer. It's called brain tumors. And we work for many, many years in Rare Cancers Europe as an organization. And these are some issues that affect some challenges of rare cancers. And when you look to rare cancers, we are talking about the challenges in a lot of rare cancers. So this is not typical for sarcomas or typical for head and neck or typical for brain tumors. These are issues that are really problematic or challenging in a lot of different rare cancers. So it's about prevention and screening. It's about late incorrect diagnosis, lack of information, widespread small population, shortage of local medical experience. So these are a lot of issues, and you are aware of these issues also in sarcomas. This is our daily business to see where the challenges are. And this is a very important topic, rare cancers, and this is a very important figure that the survival in rare cancers is worse than the survival in common cancers. That means if you look on all rare cancers, sarcomas, head and neck, neuroendocrine tumors, and different others, the survival, 5-year survival rate is about 85%. And in common cancers, like breast cancer and different others, the survival rate is about 63%. That means we have a lot to do and a lot to advocate and a lot of change within the next years to raise the survival of our patients within the next years. What is the percentage of rare cancer patients of all cancers? When you look to all cancers, do you know what is about the percentage of rare cancers? 22%, exactly. 22% of all cancers are rare. And I think this is a challenge. So we are not talking about single entities, we are talking about a group of people. And in Germany, that means more than 100,000 people every year, patients, are moving through the healthcare system, and they are seeking for help. They are seeking for diagnosis, for treatment, for clinical trials and something. So it's an important number, 22% rare cancers. And one group within the rare cancers are sarcomas. And that's also very important. Some of these issues are related to research. Some of the problems and challenges have to do with diagnostics and treatment and information and a lot of different other issues. But a lot of topics have to do with research. For example, when it comes to small groups, when it comes to medical expertise, registries, tissue banks, methodology barriers, and a lot of different other issues. That means several of these challenges have directly or indirectly to do with deficits in cancer research. And that's why it's so important that we as patient advocates needs to interact, needs to be involved in this field. Let's get a little bit step back. This has directly nothing to do with cancer. This is coming from other industries. And in other industries, it is a matter of course for many years now to involve the customer into the research process. That means if you want a new car, the car company has spoken to customers 5, 6, 7 years ago in the development process of the car. How the car should smell, how the car should sound. They get the opinion, they get the input of the customer. But unfortunately, we rarely have seen this in healthcare for the last 20, 30 years. So because of a very simple fact, healthcare providers, but also the healthcare industry, means the pharma industry, have rarely seen patients as customers. They always have seen doctors as customers or payers as customers or whomever they have seen as customers, but not the patient. That means patients are also more or less customers. They also can contribute to the process with their knowledge. So what we have seen in other industries, where it is mandatory in other industries, computer and different other areas, and in these areas we are talking in the meantime about co-creation. Bring the customer into the room and co-create solutions. That's in a very early beginning in the healthcare industry or in the healthcare business, where we need to involve patients much earlier with their knowledge, with their experience into the processes. And why should patient advocacy, why should we do this on one side, and why should patient advocates be interested in? One is the meeting of medicine and healthcare, because medicine and healthcare should benefit people. It is for the people, it's not for the doctors, it's not for the companies. It is, at the end of the day, it should benefit patients, it should benefit the societies. And that's why patients, relatives must be the focus. They are the real customers. They need to take the treatment. They need to experience different services in healthcare. So that's why it is so important to get the voice and the input and the experience of the customer. It's very easy. Everyone can be a patient tomorrow. And sometimes you get the impression when the doctors are talking, when the politicians are talking, when the pharma companies are talking, they can't be a patient. They are talking about patients, but they don't understand that they can be a patient tomorrow. It's quite easy. Or someone from their family can be a patient tomorrow. So we are not talking about aliens. Patients are no aliens. So we are talking about real people that are affected by these kind of diseases. So we also made clear that everyone can be affected tomorrow, and that's why it is important. Other topic is about patients are a cross-section through our society. So it's not about that specific patients are only the poorer people get cancer or something. It's an average through the whole society, and I think that's very, very important. And also, patients are citizens, voters, taxpayers, contributors. We are the societies. We are paying for the society on one side. That means we also have a right to be involved and listened to. That's why sometimes we are not talking about patient involvement in research. Sometimes we are talking about public involvement in research. That's another term in this direction. The second part is patients bear the ultimate risk in clinical trials, the risk for their lives. So the patients are the people who are part of the research. They are the subjects of research, more or less, because they take the risk for new drugs in clinical trials. They take the risk for wrong research questions, inappropriate study design, missing insufficient information, delays in research and development, lack of access to therapies, and so on and so on. It's on the patient. It's not on the doctors. The doctors are running the trial, but the patients are more or less bearing the risk. And that's why it's also in our interest, in interest of the patient organizations, to be part. And then, and this is the most important topic, patients know best what it means to have a disease, to live with a special condition. They are the real experts in living with this kind of disease. They can express their feelings, they can express their experience. They are the real experts. And sometimes we learn from many studies very often that the views of doctors and patients can differ. Means doctors see this on one direction and patients maybe have an opposite direction or maybe a different view on certain issue. That's why it is important to bring the patient voice into the room. Rare cancers, patients often know more than their doctors. Depends whether you have a real expert or I would call them self-appointed experts, more or less. Yeah, that's one issue. Patient group have access to very first sources of information to the patient, to the relatives. And we now entered into a new field of oncology, and this is very important. This is the field of personalized medicine or precision oncology. That means treatment becomes much more individual than in the history. In the history, you have had a chemotherapy and you gave the chemotherapy to a group of patients. In the meantime, we know that we have specific mutations, and specific mutations will need a specific drug. And this means we are much more individual, much more personalized within the whole setting of oncology. And this is also important why patients must play a bigger role within this process. We also see an increasing criticism of the old study system. Focus on the patient, it's very often ignored or neglected. A lot of things are done without thinking about patients or involving patients into the process. The results of clinical trials often far away from real life or real needs, because a trial always is something like a lab. Well, not a lab, but it's an artificial setup. This is not real life. And very often we see in real life, the situation is quite very, very different from a clinical trial. There are some information that there are far more than 1 million studies published worldwide. And some of leading experts, they are criticizing the whole system, and they mention that 85% are useless or waste of money. So the question is, where are we putting the research money? Are we putting the research money into the right direction? Are this the important question we are asking? A lot of resources are spent into doing things right instead of doing the right things. So we see trials and trials and trials answering more or less the same question or modified question, or to be secure here and to be safe here and something like this. But the question is always, is this a good investment? Shouldn't we be more innovative, and specifically in rare cancers, should we not be able to take more uncertainty and more risk to come to better results within the clinical trials? Challenges within clinical trials in rare cancers. Rare cancers means we don't have the number of patients. That means sometimes we are not able to set up a clinical trial, a phase 3 clinical trials, by bringing together 300 patients worldwide. It's not possible because we don't have the patients. That means we are based on smaller numbers. That means also that we have maybe to do an approval of a therapy based on a phase 2 trial and not based on a phase 3 trial, because we don't have the patients. So it's about, and this is one of the future discussions also going on now with EMA and different organizations. What is the value of real-world evidence? So on one side, you are running clinical trials in a very artificial setup, but on the other side, you can take a lot of real-world data by combining this maybe with the clinical trial or supporting the clinical trial. This is another issue that plays a role. Sometimes we see gaps between approval, FDA and EMA, and HTA, means reimbursement. That means on one side, it's great that a therapy is approved in Europe, But if then the different countries are not willing to reimburse this because of different criterias or different interpretation, it is quite a hard issue. And then we also know that often research is driven by company objectives. It is driven by financial interests, academic reputation, careers, publications, a lot of different other issues. So it's not always the pure idea to help the patient. Sometimes there are a lot of special or personal interests in the room. So clinical research is not an end in itself. That is clear. It ultimately should benefit patients, and the society must lead to more effective, better, more affordable therapies, thus to increase knowledge and benefits and value. So this means patient involvement in clinical research is a permanent dialogue with the patient, with the real customer. And this should be on a peer-to-peer partnership. It's not just that doctors are saying, oh, let's take the patients into the room. It's great to have the patients, but what the patients are telling is not interesting. Just to be nice, we are nice, we are committed to take the patients into the room. That's is not the way how patient involvement really should be realized. It is about working together in partnership and really driving the things together forward. And we made, during the last years, we made a very, very good experiences and different setups in doing this together and really driving this forward. Patient involvement in clinical research does not mean that patients now want to play researchers. That's not the idea. That's not our role. We don't want to play researchers. We want to contribute to research with our experience, with our wishes, with our opinion, or maybe with our data or whatever we can contribute to the research process. So that's the way forward. Historically, we have seen participation. That means patients take part in clinical trials. Then we have seen more and more cooperation. We have seen first patient organizations working together with medical experts in running clinical trials to communicate, to help, to recruit the trial, something like this. Now we are more and more coming to the area of involvement, where more and more patient experts are involved in the process. And what we really want to see in the future is partnership. We want to be patients as research partners established as a standard. It's not just a wish or just lip service or just by chance. It should be a standard that patients are involved in the whole process. This is another example. This is a drug development process. And patients can play a crucial role in this whole drug development process. For example, in the very early beginning, the investigators and the researchers need to learn, what does it mean to live with this disease? What are the challenges to live with this disease? What are the symptoms? What are the problems? What is the patient's pathway? And all these questions. So it's about learning more about the patient situation. And then following the process, it is important maybe to involve in the setup of a clinical trial, in the protocol synopsis or in the protocol design. That's where we need patients who are more knowledgeable or more experienced in the research process, who understand more about research. That means we also need to train ourselves and we need to train our colleagues to understand more about the research process. It is not so complicated, but we need to move forward and to really learn more about research. So that means following the whole process, sometimes we need the patient to bring his really experience, his personal issues to the table. And sometimes we need patient experts who are speaking for a huge number of patients, who have the overview about more patients and also have the experience of being part of the research process. They understand about clinical trial design. What is an umbrella trial? What is a basket trial? What are specific indicators? What are key performance indicators? And a lot of different other issues. So that's needs a lot of a certain knowledge to understand how research works. At the end, just some aspects for a cancer patient organization. Patient involvement in clinical research means enormous opportunities for change. These are areas where patient impact, patient involvement can make a huge difference for patients, whether, for example, a trial is offered, where a trial is, for example, offered in the right direction, whether patients know about the trial, and a lot of other questions that could be really helpful. Patient involvement in clinical research means also to understand how research works and which language is spoken. That means we need for our patients basic training. We need to train our patients, and I will come a little bit later to this topic, to understand how research in your country and in sarcomas is organized. You need to understand in your country who is driving research, who is offering clinical trials, how are clinical trials set up, who is funding clinical trials, and a lot of these issues. That's very important. The next topic is close peer-to-peer cooperation with experts, researching companies, and other stakeholders. That means this should be on an eye level, on a peer-to-peer partnership, and not just, oh, let's ask the questions. Let's ask the patients by ticking the box, okay, we have talking to the patients, and that's it. That's not the way. So we really need a peer-to-peer partnership in this area. To prepare your organization to be part of the research process, your organization needs to also be prepared. Your colleagues in the organization also need to understand more about the research process. To analyze and define where in sarcomas the needs and gaps are and the research priorities should be. That's where we as Sarcoma Patients Euronet has already started the process. In general, changing mindset that this topic is a core success factor for research and not just a nice PR idea. And working with pharma companies over the last years, we have seen companies who really are interested in getting the patient input, who are really interested, who put patient involvement in the DNA of the company. And we have seen others just talking about involving patients, more or less lip services as a PR campaign or whatever they do, but not as a real task for the company. And many people within the companies need to understand why is it so important to do this. And so also very often we help the companies to make this process more understandable. Why is it so important? But also to understand that countries are differently developed on this topic. We will hear in a minute from our colleague Roger how the UK has started in this cancer history for more than 20 years, but also to unite with other patient organizations to make general progress on this topic. If patient involvement in your country is not so good developed so far, work with other organizations together and make this as an important topic, drive this forward together with other organizations, then you have the power. And then you will also raise the attention to the topic. At the end of the introduction, just a valuable document. There was the TRIO Council, the EU presidency between Slovenia, Portugal, and Germany. And they came up with a bottom-up process with 130 stakeholders from 16 countries across Europe, and they developed the principles of successful patient involvement in cancer research. This is an extremely valuable document. You can find it on the website of the Bundesministerium für Bildung und Forschung. And maybe Michi can share the link afterwards so that you can go and download the document, because this is important for your own country to understand maybe what are really basic principles to do this in a successful way. Okay, so this was setting the scene, why patient involvement is so important. And now we are moving forward with some of the presentations, some practical examples. And if I'm right, we are starting with our colleague from UK, Roger. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Marcus. I'm not going to go into any of the whys and the wherefores, none of the theory. I'm going to tell you a story. And I'm not going to use slides, apart from one right at the end, because I believe that you listening to the words is going to be more important than reading them, so that you get a rounded picture. Now, as you know, I'm a patient. I'm not a typical researcher at all. Indeed, I'm a journalist by background. I went to my first cancer research meeting in 2001. Now, the big question that keeps being asked is, why should patients get involved in clinical research? Well, Marcus has given some of those answers and some of the background. It's a good question because there are a lot of people in the medical profession who are still asking it, and we need to have an answer. The first breakthrough, as Marcus said, came in HIV/AIDS in the 1980s, when patients were brought into the teams designing and developing clinical trials at the Medical Research Council in London. The lesson was learned. A new government came into power in the UK in 1997, and it set out to change cancer treatment. And part of that was to encourage researchers to involve patients. No one was quite sure what the patients would do, or indeed what they could do. But there were influential voices saying it had to be done, and we had to see what would come out of it. There was once a rather meaningless slogan, "Nothing about us without us," which has been quite widely used. But it was when patients started asking questions in meetings that researchers had to take note, and change began to happen. I believe, and there are many who agree with me, that as a result, research is a higher quality, it happens more quickly, and it delivers better results for patients when patients are involved with developing that research. Some of the questions we asked in those early meetings seem a bit strange when remembered today. There was, why are patients over 65 years old not included in clinical trials when most cancer patients are over 65 years old? Now, believe it or not, that was a very real question 20 years ago. And it got addressed. Then another one. Does it make any difference to a study of chemotherapy if the pharmacies in different hospitals make up the dose at different times, some of them store it for longer than others, and the fridges are set at different temperatures? No one knew the answer to that. No one had ever studied chemically what happened to chemotherapy after it had been made up, believe it or not. It resulted in a major investigation in the UK and the development of standards for dispensing chemotherapy in a clinical trial. There's a personal one to me, that, because I'd noted differences when I was on chemotherapy. The questioning just went on right across the board, every cancer you can imagine. In prostate cancer, the numbers of cases diagnosed in Afro-Caribbean men was noted. And it was patients who forced it into becoming an urgent subject for research. In sarcoma, patients and doctors saw promise in the new drug trabectedin, Nildelis, and worked together to push it into acceptance by the regulators. It was patient involvement in breast cancer research that demanded a study into the psychological impact of reconstructive surgery. And believe it or not, it showed there was a huge benefit for breast cancer patients from reconstructive approaches. It was patient involvement that pushed UK research funders into investing in a multi-million-pound 6-year programme to build research capacity and capability in palliative and supportive care, funding PhD students and fellowships and building research units. So during the 2000s, we built a national team of involved patients. In 2002, I was actually the 14th person to join the national group. We now have a national consumer forum today, which has over 150 members. People have joined and left. Some sadly have passed away from their disease. And 3 of these have been sarcoma patients who were good friends. Maybe altogether between 300 and 400 people have been members over the 20 years, and 10 altogether have had a sarcoma. And I'm very pleased to welcome Terry here today, who's joined me with that group some years ago. Inevitably, once we had established relationships with our professional colleagues, new challenges came our way. I chaired the National Patient Group in 2004 to 2007. I had meetings with ministers. I worked with the National Cancer Director and with the Director of the National Cancer Research Network. I was called on to speak to pharma, to research institutes, university students, medical students. Other members of the patient group became involved in translational research, where laboratory science and clinical research join up, asking the same sorts of questions, and of course, different ones, because it's a different environment. We got involved with research into natural remedies, finding that, with a few exceptions, their effect was largely psychological rather than medical. Some of our members campaigned for plain language in research, primarily so that patients could more easily understand what they would face, but also to help, believe it or not, researchers understand what other researchers were doing. One of our members helped design and took part in a study using a North Sea diving decompression chamber as an adjunct to radiotherapy. Some quite astonishing ideas were explored. And we were called on to take part in funding decisions and in reviewing developments which had already been funded. In one case, we were involved in the decision to stop funding a project at a major world-class university. And as you can imagine, that caused some uproar at the time. And in another project, funding awarded with our involvement amounted to £70 million over 5 years. That sort of involvement is continuing because there is a very big programme working with between Cancer Research UK and the National Cancer Institute in the USA, which is investing 120 million in exploring innovative areas of research. And patients are heavily involved in the decisions over who will get those funds. But then in 2010, our government changed again. And we found ourselves in a landscape being driven by a new political dogma rather than by evidence of what was practical, ethical, and identifiably beneficial. And it happened that our cancer charities picked up the gap and became more prominent. In sarcoma was Sarcoma UK, BCRT, the Bone Cancer Research Trust, and GIS Cancer UK were able to grow and establish themselves as influencers. Our biggest cancer charity, Cancer Research UK, is now central in cancer policy issues nationally and involves patients in its work. Our main NHS research organisation, the NIHR, has developed with patient involvement high in its list of priorities. And this means that academic cancer research in the UK involves patients as a matter of routine. And more work is now being done in sarcoma than I ever dreamt was possible back when I started getting involved in 2002. The UK government, the national regulators, and our biggest funders have now published a shared commitment to patient involvement in healthcare research. I was one of the patients involved in writing that commitment, and we have a patient review group to assess progress and to hold the regulators, the funders, and government departments to account. New clinical trial regulations are going to come into force next year in the UK and in Europe. And we know that patient involvement is going to be a prominent new requirement. Theoretically, no clinical trial will get regulatory approval unless it can show evidence of patient involvement in its development. This is going to take us down that road towards co-creation that Marcus mentioned earlier, where we can see patients and researchers working together to lead new studies. Following Brexit, our medicines regulator, the MHRA, has moved quickly to bring patients into the regulatory process. This brings the HTA bodies and the medical regulator, the MHRA, together so that an early understanding of drugs in development can be made and the regulatory pathway accelerated, with patients involved at every step and the pharma companies encouraged to involve patients. So after 20 years, we can see that patients are having a growing influence at almost every step in the UK's cancer research landscape. In Europe, EORTC has now published its involvement strategy and is encouraging greater involvement. And indeed, later on this afternoon, I'm going to an EORTC workshop and speaking as a patient representative there. The European Commission makes involvement a requirement in just about every healthcare initiative it takes, remembering that national governments still control their healthcare systems. So it's not going to be European decision-making that drives change at the national level. It's going to be national organizations. Pharmaceutical companies are taking notice of all this, and around the world, patient involvement in research is growing. Now, we said we'd put up some lessons. So Mickey, could you pop that slide up, please? This is just some core lessons which you can take on board as I talk about my final points. I can't actually see it. Is it there? Can someone tell me if you can see a slide? Yes? No? Ah, there we are. Thanks, Mickey. Now we need more sarcoma patients willing to take part in all this. Don't be worried if you know nothing about research. It isn't actually difficult. You just have to be prepared to listen, question, learn, speak up when you feel it's right to do so, and keep listening. Some organizations offer training. As SPAEN, we've worked with EORTC, with ESO, and with WECAN on training, and we will do so again. So if the opportunity occurs for you to take part and be involved in research, I would encourage you to do so. And if you do get involved, SPAEN would like to know about what you're doing, because building a research-involved patient network is a priority for us. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Roger, sharing your experience, and just mention this to the history. I think looking to Europe, UK has really the longest experience in doing patient involvement in clinical research in cancer, around about 20 years now. And more countries are following now. US has a lot of experience, but also
I think, Marcus, we shouldn't.
So we need to move forward in this direction. And I think you have seen what is possible if patients really engage, if patients really move forward and are connected with other patients, they can drive the agenda, they can change the agenda.
Yeah, Marcus, I would.
So can we just switch to the next presentation? Okay. So in Germany, this is the example for Germany. We are far behind the UK because historically in Germany, the patient organizations had been extremely powerful when it comes to patient support. So direct to the patient, patient information, coping, all these issues, but the patient organizations are in a very early stage when it comes to political influence, but also patient involvement in clinical research. So this is a development of the last maybe 2, 3, 4 years, where we are now making some progress because the politicians are listening to us. This is one of the issues, but also we see more and more investigators and medical experts, researchers, who are really convinced that this makes sense. And this is an example from Germany now, and I'm really happy that I'm on this journey together now with other colleagues for the last 1.5 years. It's about patient involvement in cancer research in a specific area. It's called the NCT. The NCT means National Center for Tumor Diseases, and this started some years ago with an NCT in Heidelberg, that's over here. Then some years later, we have seen in combination the NCT in Dresden. And then with this kind of campaign, the National Decade Against Cancer, this was launched in 2018, there was the interest now in expanding this NCT. So there was a broad process in Germany to expand the NCT from these 2 locations together with the DKFZ. The DKFZ is the Cancer Research Institute in Germany doing basic research with 3,000 people in Heidelberg, and to expand this network to other locations. So there was a big process in Germany finding other locations. And so in the future, it is planned to have these six locations. So we have Heidelberg and Dresden. We will have an NCT West with Essen and Köln. We have Berlin. We have Vera. This is more or less Würzburg, Erlangen, Regensburg, Augsburg. And then we have Southwest, means Tübingen, Ulm, and Stuttgart. So these are the future locations or the regional parts of the NCT. That was one point, to find these new NCTs, but now the next step was, how should they work together? What is the profile of this new NCT? And so we started in December 2020, so around about 1.5 years ago, we started a so-called strategic planning process. And this is the positioning of the NCT. We have in Germany, we have a fantastic basic research and preclinical translational research. This is about the university hospitals, university medicine. We have a network called DKTK, and we have the DKFZ. They are doing a fantastic basic research. And on the other side, we have a lot of clinical studies, clinical study groups running clinical trials together with industry, and a lot of activities by clinical therapy comparison, optimization, and implementation. But what the bottleneck in Germany was and is the so-called clinical translation and innovation. That means to bring the research results faster to the patients, academically driven by phase 1 and phase 2 trials. That's the major issue. And not just only talking about drugs. Drugs is only one part of the story, but also talking about surgery, radiation, and different areas. So it's about to bridge this gap, to bridge this bottleneck. That's the future NCT focus, to come up more with academically driven research and academically driven clinical trials, so-called IITs, and different other aspects. What important of this concept was, when we started 1.5 years, this concept, it was absolutely clear, and this was done by the government to make very clear, if you build up this new NCT, patient involvement in clinical research is a must. It's not just a choice or it's just a nice idea. It is a must. That means that patient involvement started in the development phase of this strategic concept. In the future NCT, patient involvement in clinical research is a must, but also starting the concept, starting the development of the concept, patient involvement was a must. So that means we are patient involved, or we are patient representatives in the leadership group, in working groups, in projects, in the network. So everywhere patient representatives are involved, running this project forward together with our medical experts. So we are a team. If we are talking about the leadership group, we have 40 of the leading researchers in Germany in the room. They are top-level researchers in the room, running big cancer centers, together with 4 patient advocates discussing all the issues together with them. And this is unique for Germany. This is really an important historic chance to drive the whole agenda forward in Germany. So for example, when we talked about the priority research topics, we agreed on these research topics, but the patients brought 2 research topics within the arena. One is about research on fair and equal patient access. So we are talking about underserved communities who don't have access to clinical trials. And we want to do more research within the NCT to understand better what's going on there. And a second topic that was brought by the patient community was about the research on patient-reported outcomes, because this is an important topic in the future, how we deal with this. So this was driven by the patients. We discussed a lot of very important topics. This is more or less expert stuff together with the patients, but this is driven by the patients, these 2 questions or these 2 priorities. The next topic within the NCT was, what are the priority disease areas where the patients should, or the NCT should have a focus on? And then we made very clear, we can do lung cancer, we can do blood cancer, we can do breast cancer and all these common cancers, but it's a must for the NCT to do also the rare cancers. That means patients in the room made very clear, if the NCT should run, you must do rare cancer research. And then we agreed to establish this rare cancer area and start with brain tumors, pediatric cancer, and sarcomas. And in the future, we will see other indications following the NCT with head and neck and different other. That's patient input. That's real patient input in changing the agenda totally in the right direction. So this was the result. So in end of January, we produced a book with 300 pages in English describing the whole NCT concept, and more or less these 2 chapters had been written by us, by the patients, patient involvement and patient empowerment, and patient access and outreach. So this is a cooperative, this was really a co-design, a co-work together with our medical colleagues. And this is our concept. So we developed a whole concept for patient involvement, starting with a philosophy, a structure for future NCT patient involvement. So what is the network? How would we like to set up the network within the NCT? About governance, we want to be involved in every step of the government process. But about the visual identity within the NCT, how are we going to work and communicate together? How are we going to be compensated for our work? Because we can't do this on a voluntary basis. That's not possible, because this is public funding money. Doctors are getting money, and a lot of different other people are getting money out of this budget. And why should patient advocates not be compensated for their work? I think it's a logical step forward. We discussed about the mindset and the NCT culture, so that this is the right way. We need to drive the mindset forward. We need to move to our colleagues and make our colleagues understandable that this is an important topic. We need patient involvement in all project, use cases, clinical trials. We need to create success stories that this really makes sense what we are doing. We need to train our colleagues, our medical colleagues, because some of the colleagues have no idea how to do patient involvement. So we really need to train and educate and help them to understand this. We defined fields of action, shared projects where we want to do during the next years. What are our common tasks in the field of action? We founded a patient expert academy where we will train our colleagues within the whole network, and we will run an annual patient expert conference, patients as research partners, and we will have the first conference now in early October, so first weekend in October. So we are moving forward with the whole story. So this is the network. So we have a national council, we have the academy, we have the annual conference, and then we have the regional patient council, so that we have a full network working together and really having a clear structure. And our midterm objectives is to have around about 300 well-developed and well-trained patient advocates for Germany within the next years who are really able to contribute to research. These are the identified field of action. So we said, what can we do to directly support our patients and relatives? What is general improvement? How can we improve clinical research trials in general, but also what do we need to do together in shared projects and the future projects? And behind these small boxes, normally you will find 2 or 3 pages on ideas and objectives and something like this. So this is just an overview about the different fields of actions. This is our National Patient Expert Academy called PEAK. And PEAK is a leadership academy, or will be a leadership academy for patient representatives. So we will do in the future training for our colleagues, for patients, patient experts in different areas. So this is the logo of PEAK, and we already have a website online, unfortunately only in German, but we will also have this in the future then in English. And these are the 4 areas of education. So we will do trainings, patients as research partners, so that patients understand better what is research about. Patient structures and management. So how can we strengthen our patient structure? So what does it mean to run and manage a patient organization, to improve a patient organization? The third area is advocacy and evidence. So evidence-based advocacy, because patient representatives can learn a lot in this evidence-based advocacy. And this is the 4th area. This is the very important topic for the future, is about digital health. So we also want to train our colleagues more in the field of digital health to learn more about what's going on in digital health and how to work in this area. I just want to skip, so we have had some objectives. And then we started our first module last year in summer, 20 lessons, 20 hours in train our patients. And these had been the different areas. So we have had lessons about cancer, cancer treatment, research development, clinical trials, and so on. And we have had 40 participants in this pilot course. And the lectures had been given by patient advocates and researchers and medical experts. So this was extremely successful. So this is the first module. We created another module and a 3rd module. And in the moment when the NCT will be funded, because we are currently still in a strategic or in a planning phase and in an implementation phase, in the moment when we will get the whole funding for the NCT, we will be able then to move this forward. And this is the Patient Expert Conference. I think you have seen that things are possible. And 3 years ago, we had been in a very early situation when it comes to patient involvement in clinical research. And then you need to find the right people driving the agenda forward, and then you can make a lot of improvement. And hopefully we are now in the phase to develop the implementation concept. The implementation concept needs to be delivered until mid of October. And then the government will make a final decision whether the NCT will be funded for the next 10, 15, 20 years, and then moving forward in a whole direction. But I think that's an opportunity, not just sarcomas, but patient involvement in general. So thank you. So next presentation, I think that's an online presentation, real, yeah. And with the title Count Me In, and this is done by a colleague from US. Is the name right? Taylor Kasha, is this the right pronunciation?
Yep, that's me.
Yeah? Okay, so then we are very interested to receive your presentation. Thank you for joining us and thank you for giving us a presentation.
Of course, thank you for having me. So I'm going to share my screen with some slides. I'm really excited to share with you all today a little bit about Count Me In. So we are a US-based organization. We are located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We're also part of the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, and also have support and partnerships with Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. So I'll be talking today a little bit about how we are driving forward patient-partnered research in sarcomas and other cancers, really in building a platform for cancer research. So I think Marcus did such a wonderful job earlier in talking about the challenges of getting rare cancer representation in research and getting patients to participate in research as well. So I can skip some of these, but really what we aim to do at Count Me In is leverage connections between patients and patient communities that happen online so that we can mobilize these communities and have folks participate in research. This is also really important to us here in the US because more than 85% of cancer patients are treated in community settings where research is not typically occurring. And so therefore most patient samples and data are not being included in research and available for study. And so by leveraging, again, technology and being able to create online communities, we are trying to reach more patients who research opportunities may not be available to. And our goal with doing all of this is to generate data. So what we aim to do is generate publicly available databases of a combination of clinical, genomic, molecular, and patient-reported data in a variety of cancer types so that we can share those. Again, it's publicly available with the research communities so that researchers can access this data and find patterns in it, maybe combine it with other data sources, and really be able to do deeper investigation into the genomics or the patient-reported data of these cancer types. So Count Me In started with our first project in metastatic breast cancer back in 2015. And since then, we have over 6,300 men and women from across the United States and Canada who are participating in that project. I will just go ahead and state all of Count Me In's projects are available only in the United States and Canada. There are a lot of significant regulatory challenges for us expanding beyond those countries, but it is something that we get asked about a lot. So I wanted to make sure I clarified that here for this audience. So in starting out in metastatic breast cancer, we were able to really partner with the MBC community, hear from them what would be important about participating in research, how would they like to go about it, how do we make it accessible to them, how do we build a website and sort of a research portal that works and would resonate with the community. And after quite a bit of success, we said, okay, it's worked in metastatic breast cancer, where can we go next? And for anyone who's familiar, Corey Painter, who is one of our leaders on the Count Me In team, she has a personal experience with angiosarcoma. And so angiosarcoma was the next community that we built a project for. So in 2017, we launched our project in angiosarcoma. And to date, we have over 640 participants in that project, which is truly amazing to see sort of the spread and the representation and our ability to really, again, leverage patient communities in the places where angiosarcoma patients were already coming together and already connecting with one another to spread the word about the opportunity of participating in this research has really allowed us to grow this project so significantly. So what does it mean to have a project and Count Me In, and sort of what does patient participation look like? So like I said, our goals for all of our studies are to generate genomic, clinical, molecular, and patient-reported data to share with the research communities. And from the participant side, this looks like going to the project website, providing online consent through this secure website, also using the website to respond to surveys and give us more information about their experiences with their cancer diagnosis, treatments they may have received, locations where their cancer has been in their body, those kinds of things. We also ask patients to provide us with either a saliva or a blood sample so that we can use those for genomic sequencing. And in the consent form, also patients consent to allowing us to go back to institutions where they've received care to gain copies of their medical records, to generate that clinical information. And for some patients, they can choose also to allow us to go acquire samples of their archived tumor tissue. So any samples that have been removed by procedures, we'll go and try and get those so that we can also do genomic sequencing. And throughout the process, we also try to keep the patients and participants engaged and involved and let them know how the project is doing, how we're enrolling folks, what we're seeing, sort of what we're learning, when's our next data coming out, those kinds of things. So trying to keep an active communication between the project and our participants. So this is just a diagram really quick of kind of what I just explained in words, but in green at the top are the steps that participants take to participate in the Count Me In project. And then the blue boxes are all of the things that our team does. We have a great team that is focused day in, day out on acquiring samples and records and pulling data out of these records and cleaning them and trying to understand what it is that we can gain from our participants and how we can link all of that information together and share it in public databases. And so where do we share this data? So far, we share our data in a couple of different places. There's the CBio portal for cancer genomics, which has data released from several Count Me In projects. And that is entirely publicly available for anyone around the globe. We also share raw genomic data in the National Cancer Institute's Genomic Data Commons as well. So anyone who really wants to dig in, do some computational biology, see the raw genomic information, Count Me In projects are available there as well. And we also share data on a couple other platforms and some patient and researcher specific portals. So after establishing both the metastatic breast cancer project and the angiosarcoma project and seeing the successes that we could have in those communities, we said, where else can we take this? Where else can we go? What other communities can we engage with and build projects to really spur research forward? And so over the last several years, we have launched many other studies. We have projects in metastatic prostate cancer, esophageal and stomach cancer, brain tumors, and then of course in a couple other sarcomas I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But across all of Count Me In right now, we have over 11,000 patients in the US and Canada registered across all of our studies. And we are really excited to continue growing this and continue seeing representation from both of these countries. And if in looking at these maps, it does maybe look a little bit like we're overrepresented more on the East Coast side of things. But if you look at a population density map of the United States, it pretty much looks like this. So we have pretty good representation from across the entire country, which is great to see. So our expansions into other sarcomas started with, in 2020, we launched a specific study in osteosarcoma. And this was our first project also to enroll pediatric participants. And so far we have over 195 participants consented to that study. We're actively acquiring samples and medical records and gathering patient-reported data. We also then last summer in August of 2021, we opened Count Me In to all cancer types. So if anyone goes to joincountmein.org and they live in the United States or Canada and have been diagnosed with any cancer at any point in time, they can sign up with us and tell us more about their experiences, their cancer journey, and provide samples back to us. And so far we have over 90 participants in that study with various sarcomas, really kind of expanding our reach and the number of sarcomas represented in our participants. And soon to come in the next couple of months, we'll be launching another specific study in leiomyosarcoma as well. And we've been working with that community over the last year and a half to build that study and that project and make sure we answer questions that resonate with them and also both the patients and the researchers. And we're really excited to get into that as well. So with all of these studies, I wanted to talk a little bit about how the patient community and participants are involved both in the building process as well as the ongoing research. So for each of our projects, as we are thinking about building and establishing a project, we build a project advisory council. And these project advisory councils are really our collaborators in the development and ongoing work for every project Count Me In does. These project advisory councils are made up of patients, caregivers, family members who have been impacted by the disease that we're building a project for. And they are truly our partners in design for every single element of the research, from the colors on the website, the words on the website, the photos on the website, how we get the message out into the community about the availability of this research, new features that we may roll out, including new surveys and getting feedback on sort of every single aspect of participation is really important to us to make sure that what we're building is easy and interesting for patients to engage in, that we are able to have kind of this two-way street of communication and a relationship so that it truly feels like every participant is a partner in the research. And once projects are built, we do routinely ask for feedback, ongoing feedback from participants and community members to continuously improve the projects. And this is essential. And I think in establishing these relationships really then helps us be successful once the project is launched and getting the word out, because we rely very heavily on sort of a more grassroots approach to spreading the word about our projects. And so we ask, our project advisory council members or other folks, other participants to, if they're interested, spread the word. So post on social media, we have brochures we can send to people to hand out, sort of tell anyone in the larger community what this research is about, if they so choose. And because I think we establish these relationships and this trust between the groups, a lot of folks really go crazy with this and really go for it. So one thing we did not expect when we first launched Count Me In was actually for this kind of thing to happen. So these pictures you see are folks with their saliva kits. I have one behind me right here. It looks a little different now. But just out of the blue, sort of organically, people were getting these kits in the mail and then posting what we now call a saliva selfie on social media to say, hey, here's my kit, here's how I'm contributing to research for my disease. It was really amazing to see the enthusiasm and excitement at this opportunity to participate. We also engage with the advocacy community and advocacy organizations, and we rely on them very similarly as we do as in partners of this research and in partners of spreading the word, especially as trusted voices in their communities and folks who provide resource and support for patients at any stage of their cancer journey. Their support is so essential. And so in all of our projects, we have these advocacy partners. These are our examples from angiosarcoma, osteosarcoma, and LMS. And we are really very grateful to this participation and being able to have these folks to work with us. So engaging patients throughout the process is really at the center of what we do. As I mentioned, working with patients before, during, after, and really ongoing basis around all of these studies to work with them on design, messaging, taking their feedback seriously and not just saying, oh, we want feedback and doing nothing with it, but really thoughtfully incorporating that into the design of our work. And like I mentioned before as well, sharing back progress and results. It's also important, we realize, to meet patients where they are. So we cannot be the community builders, but rather we need to tap into existing communities of patients, of advocates, of advocacy groups. And so as folks were mentioning earlier before, making sure that you have places where the community can come together to be inclusive and sort of be a resource for others to tap into is really essential. It's also important for us as we're thinking about research and turning this into, data and generating data and using that for research, that what we're generating can be inclusive and really diverse data sets as well. Because as we put information out there, if the data is biased, then the results will be biased. And so we're constantly also thinking about how do we continue engaging more people who have yet to be represented in our specific research, as well as groups that have been marginalized and underrepresented in research traditionally. And with all of this, again, the goal is truly to make a scientific impact in this space. And so while on one hand, we, our partners, our patients, we also have partnerships as well with the scientific and research communities. So in osteosarcoma, we have this all-star group of our scientific advisors who help guide, our decision-making, some of the questions we need to ask for research. What are the genomic sequencing products that we can run on samples that will actually make a difference that haven't been done before? Or how many samples do we need to be the biggest osteosarcoma study that's released data? Those kinds of things. What are the things that we can do as Count Me In to really push forward research in that specific disease area? And so we rely on these folks for that guidance. And really appreciate also their partnership as folks who can also share the word with the research community then once data is available, making sure that it's not just being made available, but it's actually being put to use. We also have other experts in sarcomas who are our clinical champions across all of our sarcoma projects and do similar things in terms of guiding our priorities, where we can truly make a difference. And we've proven, thankfully, that not only can we engage patients and enroll participants from rare cancers in, groups that have not really been seen before, but we can also make a scientific impact. So I just wanted to close really quick with some of the impact of the angiosarcoma project so far as a little bit of a preview and some of our hopes that we have for each of the disease areas that Count Me In is engaged in, but especially in our rare disease projects. So in 2020, we were able to make a publication of our own discoveries from just a sample set of 46 patients or 36 patients, 42 samples. And that study now is being validated in clinical trials, which is really exciting. We have multiple papers by independent researchers outside of Count Me In that we do not have relationships with, who have taken the data we've made available and used it to make their own studies and publications. And we, as our team, we are currently working on an analysis of about 200 germline samples, so all of the saliva and blood samples we've received from the angiosarcoma project so far, to take a deeper look at what are some of the genomics of the germline that may be interesting or different in angiosarcoma. And then we also, of course, have our data released again in 2 different places, CBio Portal and the Genomic Data Commons. And we are looking forward to adding more data, both whole exome and RNA-seq for existing patients and also new samples in the coming years. So it takes a huge team to put all this together. These faces are not even everyone represented here, but I just wanted to, of course, extend my thanks to all of them as well, and being sort of an ambassador for the whole team here today. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Joincountmein.com or .org is our website, and that can also take you to all of our other spaces and places in all of our projects. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it, getting to share the work that we're doing at Count Me In with you all today.
I think in the interest of time, I think we really need to move to the next presentation. We still have 2 presentations and no time at the end for a lot of discussion. If we want to keep the coffee break, I think that's important. So the next presentation is a presentation from the Chordoma Foundation. Is it a live presentation or video? It's a recorded presentation. So from Kimberly D. Hassett, if I pronounce this right, from the Chordoma Foundation. And it's about patients driving research. So we have just seen patients contributing to research. Now we see another example by patients driving research.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly DeHassett, and I work for the Chordoma Foundation as their program manager. Today, I will talk more about how patients are driving chordoma research. Chordoma is a rare type of cancer that occurs in the bones of the skull base and spine and is diagnosed in just 1 in a million. That means that about 300 patients are diagnosed each year in the United States and about 700 in all of Europe. It is a challenging diagnostic and treatment odyssey. The mainstay of treatment is surgery and or radiation therapy. In about 40 to 40% of the patients, the tumor metastasizes, and better treatments are urgently needed for those who encounter recurrence or metastasis. The Chordoma Foundation was founded in 2007 by patients and their families and works to improve the lives of those affected by chordoma worldwide and leads the search for a cure. The Chordoma Foundation pursues 3 core goals, all with the patient at the center. Better treatments that will improve and lengthen the lives of patients and ultimately provide a cure. Better care for all chordoma patients, like the consensus treatment recommendations developed by an international group of 60 doctors who specialize in treating chordoma patients. And better experience for everyone navigating the complex medical, emotional, and practical challenges of chordoma. The Chordoma Foundation is focused on curing chordoma and continuously works to eliminate the barriers that stand in the way of progress. We've created the conditions necessary to optimize a strong chordoma research ecosystem, such as interconnected research community, rapid data sharing, and easy access to scientific resources like models and tissues. Chordoma tissue is critical for research, but scientists have long struggled to find samples needed to study the disease. The Chordoma Foundation Biobank solves this problem by collecting tissue samples from patients in the United States and providing the first centralized source of chordoma samples and data to the research community. The foundation provides the chordoma research community with tools, resources, and opportunities to accelerate the pace of discoveries. The foundation's work is led and driven by patients, and there has been a gigantic amount of progress made in just the past 15 years. We went from virtually no research to being done and no infrastructure to enable it to an active global research ecosystem. We have made almost 16 million in cumulative research investments and 20 million leveraged from others. Now more than 300 researchers are collaborating worldwide toward a cure, and more than 30 high-quality cell and mouse models are easily available to scientists. We have tissues from more than 200 patients in the Chordoma Biobank, and we've identified more than 25 disease drivers and targets. We went to no movement on treatments to fast-moving therapeutic development pipeline. 6,000 drugs have been screened against chordoma cell lines, and more than 70 of those drugs and combinations were tested in mice through our drug screening program, leading to 7 treatments brought into clinical trials. And initially, there was no way for those affected by chordoma to influence their own odds. And now we're at a point where there are multiple ways for patients to participate in research. Chordoma is often slow growing, and that means that investments made by patients can have an effect on their own chordoma journey. So how are patients involved? Well, one, by donating tumor tissue samples. These samples lead to cell lines, lead to mouse models, and these can be used in turn in our drug screening program. Our drug screening program is a powerful tool for enabling companies and investigators to pursue better therapies for chordoma patients. In 2021, we tested a record of 25 treatment concepts in mice, several of which dramatically reduced tumor growth and have strong potential to come into clinical trials. As a result of our drug screening efforts in 2021, we funded a clinical trial to test the cancer drug cetuximab. Another way for patients to get involved in research is through our natural history study. Researchers at the U.S. National Cancer Institute are currently enrolling chordoma patients in the natural study of rare solid tumors. The clinical and biological information collected by the study, including tumor tissue samples, will provide a better understanding of how chordomas develop and grow over time and how we can more effectively treat them. For example, we're learning from other studies that radiation may not always be required for skull-based tumors. The national history study could help us understand this further and determine which patients don't need radiations and which one do. By the end of 2020, 67 patients were enrolled in the national history study. 20 of them were international patients. The outcomes of the natural history study may also inform clinical trial design. Chordoma doesn't respond as dramatically to systemic therapies as other cancer types do. So the typical endpoints of cancers of other cancer trials aren't a good fit. Natural history study data could help us show the FDA and the EMA that other endpoints are appropriate and which will help get drugs approved. Clinical trials are also a way for patients to participate in research. Often it's a last resort or hope, but their participation will give us valuable information that will inform further research. And then there are other opportunities on how to participate. One of them is, and that's a very important one, is fundraising, because funding is critical to driving research, and donations of all sizes can directly advance research. Another example of a research opportunity was the survivorship survey done in 2020. There were 900 responses, almost 900 responses recorded to inform us about the quality of life challenges patients and caregivers face. And now our Director of Patient Services, Shannon Lozinski, is working on getting these results published. The Chordoma Foundation has always been driven by urgency, a deep sense of urgency, the urgency to find treatments that not only help patients in the future, but also offer hope to those currently affected by the disease. We recently launched CF Labs, our own lab totally dedicated to studying chordoma. And when we say our own lab, we mean the community's lab, because it's funded by the chordoma community and it's for and by patients. The idea is to bridge the gaps between the capabilities of our academic and industry partners, making it easier for them to apply their specialized technology and therapeutic expertise to this disease to make research move faster for patients. It's a way of efficiently perform crucial experiments while enabling our external research partners to focus on what they do best. The chordoma community is a small community in numbers, but it's also a mighty community. And it's very important to the Chordoma Foundation to support and engage patients and their families, no matter where they are in the world. Of course, this comes with challenges. Apart from language barriers, there are cultural differences in healthcare systems and in rules and regulations. But just like we are removing barriers to accelerate research, we're also working on removing these international barriers. One way by which we do that is through our ambassador volunteer program. Our ambassadors serve as point of contact for speakers of that particular language. They connect patients with educational materials, local support systems, and most importantly, with each other. They also help distribute educational materials to doctors and medical centers and help to identify local doctors treating chordoma for possible inclusion in the doctor directory that is on our website. Depending on the time they have available, they may do additional activities such as meetups. Our ambassador for Germany recently launched a support group, online support group, and that was really well attended. And we've expanded our ambassador program in Europe to include France, Italy, and Spain. All the ambassadors are currently focusing on creating a list of country-specific resources so that patients can get local support as quickly as possible. Another priority for the ambassadors and for us is to collaborate with local nonprofits and organizations who make a difference in the lives of chordoma patients. To summarize, in rare disease research, any type of contribution a patient can make has a very big impact. And this is illustrated by all that has been accomplished to date. The Chordoma Foundation represents how patients can play a pivotal role in accelerating research. Thank you.
Fortunately, she can't hear our applause, but I think it was another fantastic example what really patients can achieve in a specific disease driving research forward. Now we are moving to our last presentation, and this is about the GIST patient registry from LifeRef Group USA and Latin America. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Piga. Some personal greetings directly to Chile. Piga, it's really great to see you, and to Denise from LifeRef Group to talk about the patient registry. So hopefully we can do this in around about 10 minutes so that then we can move into the coffee break. So
great. Thank you, Marcus, and everyone. It's great to virtually meet you. I'm just going to dive into the presentation for the sake of time. My name is Denise Montoya, and I'm the Senior Director of Data Management and Research at the LifeRef Group. And in today's presentation, I'm going to talk about our patient registry, which is one of the many services that the LifeRef Group offers. Oh, 1 second. Can everyone see my screen? I think, yep, perfect. So about our registry. So we are the largest patient-reported registry in the world. We have over 15 years of data encompassing more than 35 patient history, given that, as we know, GIST is a rare type of cancer that it was not so long established. We have, in the data that we collect in our registry, we collect demographics information, diagnosis details. We collect all type of information in regards to treatments, FDA approved and off labels. We also collect information, crucial information of pathology and mutational biomarkers are helpful to share and understand the whole history of GIST. One of the mainest and new things that we are developing is the patient-reported outcomes. We understand that treatments are important, but for a patient perspective, the patient voice, also side effects, management of side effects are crucial in order to stay on a medication and have a positive impact on the overall survival. Another thing to add is that our data keeps increasing as research keeps increasing. The more it develops, the more fields that we can add to our registry. So as of today, we have 475 specific data fields that we collect. We do have in-house quality control. So the data we collect, has a high standard of quality control to ensure quality of data to be analyzed and shared and published. So another thing important to do is that additional of collecting the data fields, we understand that it's crucial for fast, quick turnaround of understanding data. So we also offer surveys with specific points, and in some cases, these surveys tend to develop into publications or just initial research to collaborate among different stakeholders. So just diving into the data really quick, we have over 2,000 patients in our patient registry. It's almost equally divided, a little more towards females. But in general, the LifeRef Group, it's a very large group with over 6,000 members, patients and caregivers. So just a little breakdown among the ages of diagnosis in our registry. The average age of patients is 51, females 50, males 52. Our youngest patient is 5, and then our oldest patient, she's 94, and she's still driving, and she's a rock star. So we have a very diverse patient community. So in regards to demographics, this is something that we continue to enhance, and this was also mentioned in a previous presentation, but we're continue to enhance and expand our reach to really ensure to understand GIST in many different settings. So then if we move to the tumor details, the data that we collect really correlates to what's out there. So as we can see, the 3 most common tumor locations, stomach being the lead one. Another thing to know, it's the type of diagnosis, the type of tumor at diagnosis, and the majority in our registry is Mets. Mets patients tend to join our registry more often, given, I guess, the risk of the condition at the time. So talking about risk, there are different ways to measure risk. In the LIFR group, we utilize the NIH method, which looks at primary tumor size, mitotic rate, and location. Out of that, all the patients that have single tumor can be assessed to risk. We have a predominance of high-risk patients. And why is this important? Like, why knowing that we have a higher risk population in our data? Because this is what really drives our purpose as an organization. So we know these high-risk patients need the best of the best in regards to quick turnaround of treatment, clinical trial, knowledge of what's best treatment course. So this is important because this really reinforces that what we do as an organization, it's for the benefit of this patient, is to ensure that we can assist this patient for a better prognosis. So talking about prognosis, one thing to really keep in mind is mutational testing. Mutational testing, and as it was mentioned before in other discussions, precision medicine. And we're talking about testing and biomarker testing, but why is this important? We did a small study of mutational testing, and what you can see here is very crucial. And if there is anything you're taking from this presentation, I wish is this slide, which is you're showing how overall survival among patients that receive mutational testing and didn't receive mutational testing is extreme different. So as you can see, patients that receive mutational testing have an overall survival with data from our registry of 22.5 years compared to the ones that didn't receive testing, which it was 10.3. It's a massive difference. So the LIFR group, after we undertake this study, we understood how important this is. But now it's obvious that mutational testing is important for patients, specifically for patients that are predisposed for oral chemotherapy. But the reality is that in just only about 20% of patients receive mutational testing. However, we're proud to announce that within members of the LIFR group, our percentage is a little higher, of 54 patients know their mutation, but still it's not 100%. And we want to increase the number because we know how important this is for the overall survival of the patient, for the prognosis of the patient. So what we did, we do have, aside from the registry, we also have a tissue bank. So all the clinical history is attached to a tissue to really fully understand the whole pattern of GIST. So what we did, we launched an initiative with great sponsors of Bayer and Tempus Lab. And what we're doing, we're offering free NGS testing, which is a very advanced and very broad panel of genes to really understand and go outside the box of just the KIT and PTGFR genes, which are the most common ones for GIST. We're really expanding it to fully understand. Currently, we're enrolling. So far, we have like almost over 100 patients enrolled, and we are seeing very impactful results. We're working on a publication on that, so unfortunately, I can't share the results, but all I have to underline here is the importance of testing for precision medicine and a very accurate treatment plan for the patient. So then with that, the mutations in our registry, as I was saying, the 55% of reported mutations, we have primary mutations as well as secondary mutations. The primary mutations are very consistent with KIT and PTGFR, but we also have wild type. Wild type is any mutation that it's not KIT or PTGFR in GIST. These are just the common mutations. I'm just going to skim this, but then I do want to emphasize the wild type. Wild type doesn't end there. We are really encouraging that advanced testing to really understand what's the patient mutation, to why it is important, again, for treatment. So whenever a patient comes to the LIFR group and joins our registry, and if a patient has that wild type mutation, we encourage that broader panel to find a marker that's growing, that's promoting that growth or promoting the tumor development. So we also have secondary mutations. Secondary mutations appear in GIST when, and how did this affect GIST? It's because they also have an impact on the sensitivity of the approved treatment. So when a patient stops showing positive results in the treatment, most likely there is a secondary mutation that might be driving the tumor development, and therefore not responding to the medications. That's why testing throughout the journey, it's important. So just a summary of the medications reported in 2021 from our annual report last year, you can see that we have a variety of approved treatment. FDA treatments are here. And then we also have off-label treatments and clinical trials. We do encourage to advance research to really understand and develop. We work with our patients to ensure that we can help them achieve that goal. So then side effects. We know that each treatment comes attached to a side effect. Here in the Life of Food, we really take not only the data collection, but also the patient perspective. Behind that patient taking a medication, there is a family, there is a father, there's a mother who has, or a daughter or a son that has something, going on every day in their life. So these medications affect their day-to-day. So understanding what's causing this and helping them manage this so they can have a well-balanced life of taking this oral medication that's helping them with their cancer, but also combining that lifestyle with their day-to-day is important. So the Life of Fruit is developing patient-reported outcomes to understand and help manage these side effects. Now, our patient registry is worldwide, it's very global. As you can see, we have the top 10 countries, but in total, we have 82 countries in our registry, and we want to ensure that we really target as many and spread the awareness of the importance of advocacy and collecting this data with the purpose of helping patients. So then we just talk about data and outcomes, but what do we do with this data? Like, why do we do what we do? So as it was mentioned, the importance of advocacy and patient voice and collaboration. I feel like we are that middle ground among different stakeholders. We can be that echo of the patient voice, as well as we can work with our medical advisory board, and we can work with pharma, we can work with everything to really ensure that the patient is at the center of any decision. The data that we collect, it's constantly being published. Collaborations, it's our priority. We ensure that our collaborations are on top of the line to also voice the patient needs. And then we ensure global collaborations are important. We know that this work of helping others needs to be done as a group. So this is kind of one of our priorities as well. So with that, I just want to end by thanking all of our patients, caregivers, key stakeholders that continue to support our efforts to move this research forward. We're not able to do it without you. So thank you. And with that, talking about great patients, I have the pleasure to introduce our next topic, which is the GIS patient registry in Latin America by Piga Fernandez.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you everybody, and for the invitation for me to be here today with you. I will try to make a summary of what is the GIS patient's reality in Chile. I am, for the ones who don't know me, I'm Piga. I'm president of Fundación GIS Chile, and I also work for the LifeRef group as a global coordinator. I have, as a GIS survivor, as a GIS patient and GIS survivor, I have dedicated an amount of time in advocating in my country for GIS patients, for them to have an accurate diagnosis and treatment. Next slide, please, Denise. This is like a snapshot of the reality of patients in Chile. This information is part of the study of one of the largest cohorts to date of Latin American GIS patients, which included clinical data and risk stratification assessments of patients from Fundación GIS Chile and Fundación GIS Mexico within the Salud con Datos project. What we found here is that Chilean GIS patients seem to be diagnosed at an earlier age. 1 out of 4 are diagnosed at an advanced stage. And the most frequent sites are the primary tumor is in the stomach and small intestine. And what we also found is that according to the both criteria, the patients are diagnosed, have a high risk. And this reinforced the need for us to advocate for adjuvant systemic treatments, also for localized and operable disease, and also the need of mutational testing in order to choose the correct treatments for these patients. Next slide, please. And based on our clinical data and patient-reported outcomes, we've, as I just said, we found the need of making mutational testing to our patients. So with the support of Pfizer and the collaboration with our medical advisor, Dr. Marcelo Garrido, we were able to work in a project, and we're still working on it, to make it possible to offer all the patients to have their mutational tests done. And this initiative includes the mutational analysis of KITs exon 9, 11, 13, and 17, and PD-GFRA exons 12, 14, and 18. So far, we have tested 61 patients, and as I told you, we'll continue working on this project. Next slide, please. Which were the results of so far? This data is interim. It hasn't been published yet, but of the 61 patients that were tested, only 46 samples met the criteria for mutational analysis. 25 patients harbored KIT mutations, 3 exon 9 and 22 exon 11. 5 displayed PD-GFRA mutations, 1 is exon 12 and 4 exon 18. And we had 18 patients with KIT and PDGF wild type GIST. And this, next slide, please. And as I told you, I dedicated some of my time, considerable time advocating in my country. And this has, what we have done here is mainly in advocating for 2 laws. The first one is the Ley Ricardo Soto law, which we were able to add that all Chilean patients with unresectable and or metastatic GIST had the coverage through all the health providers, public health and private health, should cover the cost of diagnostic confirmation of GIST, including pathological analysis and CT scan, and the pharmaceutical treatment with imatinib as first line or sunitinib as second line. This, for many of you, may seem very little, but for us here, it's a huge achievement, because before this, there was there was no coverage of any health system for any treatment for GIST. Also, GIST didn't even had a code, so there was no possibility of having access to diagnosis or treatment if you didn't pay it out of your pocket. Next slide, please. And the other advocacy great job that we have been done here is in we've been working for many years to try to have a national cancer law, which finally was passed. And what does this law mean? That it provides universal coverage to all Chilean patients, cancer patients, with appropriate diagnosis and treatment for cancer, regardless their origin, their ethnicity, age, or whatever. I mean, that means access to all cancer patients in Chile. And this law aims to provide also the acquisition of diagnostic and therapeutic equipment, increase the cancer specialists in all the health network around in the country, and of course, facilitate the access to a broader spectrum of cancer treatments. This law, as I told you, has already passed, and now we're working and advocating for its implementation according to what the patients need. Next slide, please. And one of the main achievements of this law is that it established a National Cancer Commission that supports the Chilean government and especially the Ministry of Health with scientific research, policymaking, and development anti-cancer strategies. And the importance of this commission is that it's conformed by representatives of the academia, by clinicians, by the scientific society, and also of 2 cancer patients that was elected among all the patient organizations in Chile. This is the first time that patients are sitting in the same table with all the, generating all the inputs that's going to be reported to the policy makers in Chile. And the picture that I'm showing, I'm not sitting on the National Cancer Commission table, but I just wanted to share you that picture. It's one of the many times that I had to go to the Congress and to the Senate advocating for Chilean GIST patients. And I think that it was something that I never thought I would be doing, but apparently it's one of the many surprises or the many gifts living with GIST has given me. So thank you very much. I tried to be as brief as possible, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Piga. In the interest of time, we are far over time, so we will have not the time now to have a broader discussion on the topic. But I think you have seen how important patient involvement in clinical research is and what are the opportunities are. And we have seen examples where patients directly are involved in research and where patient advocates or patient organizations are driven research or are involved or are the drivers of research. So I think that session gave you a lot, what we normally say, food for thoughts. I think this is a lot to think about what to do and how to do it, maybe with other organizations together in your country, because it's always very, very problematic to do it on your own. But when you build up alliances in moving these things forward, I think that makes a lot of sense. So thank you very much for all these fantastic presentations. And in the interest of time now, we will have now a coffee break until 4:15. So we will not shorten the coffee breaks to 10 minutes. That doesn't make any sense. So we will come back of 4:15 and then we will start our AGM. So thank you very much.